The morning of October 16th, 1793. Paris wakes beneath a sky the color of cold ash. Bells toll across the Seine, echoing through empty streets that once carried royal carriages. Now, those same stones tremble beneath the boots of guards. The air feels heavy, almost sentient, as if even the city understands what it is about to witness. Inside the conciergerie, a palace turned prison, a woman sits alone. The walls glisten with moisture, and the floor sweats the chill of the river below. Marie Antoinette, once draped in silk and laughter, now shivers in a coarse linen gown. Her hair, once powdered and perfumed, lies unevenly cut. Her hands tremble, not from fear, but exhaustion. The Queen of France is no longer a monarch, nor even a prisoner of state. She is merely a body waiting for the blade. Outside her cell, footsteps approach, measured, metallic, unhurried. The iron door groans as it opens. A single guard enters, holding a candle whose flame dances weakly against the stone. The flicker reveals her face, drawn, pale, and yet strangely serene. She looks up, and the flame trembles, as if reluctant to illuminate what remains of royalty. For months, she has endured interrogations, humiliation, and a mockery of justice. They called her Widow Capet now, stripping even her name of its crown. In the damp corridors, echoes of laughter from her guards often followed her like shadows, reminders that the Revolution devoured its enemies not only with death, but with ridicule. Her trial had lasted 2 days. The outcome was written before the first accusation was spoken. The Revolutionary Tribunal called her crimes unspeakable: treason, conspiracy, and even incest with her son, an accusation so vile it silenced the courtroom. When she rose to answer, her voice did not shake. Nature itself refuses to respond to such a charge, she said, and in that single moment even her accusers looked away. But the gavel fell all the same. The verdict had been chosen long before her words. Now the tribunal's order rests on a wooden table beside her, signed, sealed, final. Death by guillotine at 11 o'clock. Her confessor has been sent for. The air carries the faint odor of wax and iron, mingling with damp stone. Every sound becomes a reminder of time slipping away, the distant drip of water, the soft hiss of the candle. Paris outside is restless. Crowds gather near the Place de la Révolution, their breath visible in the morning chill. Children sit upon their fathers' shoulders to see better. Vendors sell bread and apples beside the scaffold. For them, this is spectacle, a moral play in which justice is performed before an audience hungry for absolution. The Queen's death is not a punishment, it is theater. Inside the cell, she kneels upon the stone floor. The priest arrives, face pale, his hands trembling with both devotion and pity. He speaks softly of forgiveness, but his words sound fragile against the weight of silence. She listens, not as a monarch seeking grace, but as a woman seeking peace. The sins of a kingdom have been laid upon her shoulders, and now she will carry them to the grave. In another corner of the prison, guards murmur among themselves. Some laugh, others look uneasy. Even the cruelest among them seem subdued by the gravity of what is to come. For years, France had blamed her for hunger, war, and decadence. Let them eat cake, they said, she mocked, though no record proves she ever uttered it. But truth had long since lost its throne to vengeance. A faint light begins to bleed through the narrow window above her. Dawn. It arrives grey and indifferent. The Queen rises, her movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. She adjusts her gown, straightens her back, and breathes deeply. For a moment, the years fall away, the laughter of Versailles, the glimmer of chandeliers, the gardens perfumed with roses. All gone now, as if they belong to another lifetime, another soul. The guard reappears. His armor catches the morning light. "It is time," he says, though his voice falters. She nods once, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. There is no struggle, no plea for mercy. Only the faint rustle of fabric as she moves toward the door. The corridor is long, lined with barred cells. Prisoners press against the iron, whispering as she passes. Some curse her name. Others cross themselves in silence. The Queen walks between them with steady steps. Her chains rattle softly, a kind of music, solemn and metallic. At the far end, the doors open to a courtyard. Cold air rushes in, carrying the smell of rain and smoke. She blinks against the sudden light. The cart that will carry her to the guillotine waits just beyond the gate. The driver avoids her eyes. 2 horses snort, their breath clouding in the morning chill. She pauses for a moment, glancing upward. The sky above Paris is neither bright nor dark, just a pale expanse of waiting. Somewhere, a church bell tolls. Once those bells had rung for coronations and weddings. Now they toll for execution. Back inside, the priest follows her to the threshold. He murmurs a final prayer, voice trembling. May God receive your soul. She does not answer, only places a hand upon the cold stone of the wall, the same wall that has watched centuries rise and fall. Then she steps through the gate into the open air of history. Behind her, the cell door closes with a sound like a sigh. Within that silence, something irreversible occurs, the transformation of a woman into a symbol. The revolution will claim it as victory. The world will remember it as tragedy. As the cart begins to move, its wheels groan against the cobblestone. The sound rolls through the courtyard like distant thunder. A murmur swells from the crowd beyond. Anticipation, not pity. To them, the death of Marie Antoinette is the final act in a long play of betrayal and retribution. But within that sound lies something darker, the echo of a nation devouring its past to feed its future. The same crowd that once cheered her beauty now demands her silence. The same city that crowned her queen now sharpens its blade upon her neck. And still, she does not weep. History will paint her in cruelty, in arrogance, in detachment. Yet here, beneath the gray sky of a bleeding dawn, she is only human, a mother, a widow, a soul stripped of all but dignity. As the cart creaks forward toward the waiting square, Paris exhales. The revolution has promised justice, but what it delivers today is spectacle. A queen is about to fall, and with her something deeper, the illusion that humanity and vengeance can ever share the same throne. The drums begin to sound in the distance, faint but steady. Their rhythm carries across the river, through the fog, through the narrow veins of the city. Each beat draws her closer to the blade, and closer to the moment when even the revolution must look upon its own reflection and wonder if the price was worth the blood. The sky lightens, revealing the outline of the guillotine in the far distance. The wood dark with rain, the blade glinting like a promise. And as the cart turns the corner, disappearing into the streets of Paris, the last echo of her cell fades. But the silence she leaves behind is not peace. It is the kind that lingers, heavy, watchful, eternal, the kind that waits for the sound of the blade. The dawn of October 16th broke with a stillness that felt unnatural. The Seine moved like lead beneath the bridges, and the air carried a weight that could not be measured. Paris was awake, though it did not speak. Its breath gathered in the narrow alleys, in the archways, in the stone mouths of gargoyles that had watched kingdoms rise and fall. The revolution had promised to erase the old world. Yet on this morning, the old world still breathed, trembling beneath the surface of a city pretending to be reborn. Inside the conciergerie, footsteps echoed through the corridor. Iron keys clattered. The guards approached the cell with their usual indifference, but something in their pace betrayed hesitation. Behind the door, Marie Antoinette waited, no longer the Queen of France, not even a condemned traitor now, but a relic of an order about to be extinguished. She stood when the bolt slid open. The gesture was instinctive, the remnant of ceremony, one final act of dignity in a world that had forgotten the meaning of the word. Her executioners entered, led by an officer of the National Guard. He carried the decree from the tribunal, though he did not read it. The words had already been spoken. Repetition would not cleanse their cruelty. Instead, he informed her that her final hour had come, that she must prepare for her journey. His voice was rehearsed, respectful, mechanical, hollow. They removed her black mourning dress, replacing it with a plain white chemise. The fabric clung to her frame, cold and thin. It was meant to symbolize purity, though in truth it stripped her of identity. White, the color of surrender. Her hair, already unevenly cropped, was tied back with trembling hands. No jewels, no ribbon, no emblem of the crown, only silence and the sound of fabric brushing against stone. She accepted the change without protest. When they shackled her wrists, she raised them herself. The metal was cold, biting into her skin. The officer hesitated for a moment before tightening the clasp. His eyes did not meet hers. Perhaps he feared what he might see. Not arrogance, not defiance, but the unbearable calm of someone who had already made peace with her fate. The priest arrived soon after. Abbé Girard, her confessor, had spent the night in prayer. He held a small crucifix, its wooden surface worn smooth by other hands, other deaths. He whispered a benediction as she knelt, his voice breaking on the words. She answered softly, her tone steady, almost maternal. Those who watched could not decide if she was seeking forgiveness or granting it. Outside the cell, the cart was being prepared. Its wheels, darkened by mud and age, creaked in protest as they were moved into position. The horses stamped restlessly, sensing the unease of the morning. The driver, a man hardened by countless such duties, spat into the dirt, muttered a prayer he did not believe, and climbed onto the bench. In the corridor, the guards formed a line. Their uniforms were damp with mist. When the door opened, every man straightened, not out of respect, but out of some deeper instinct, the recognition of finality. She stepped into the passage without faltering. The corridor that had once echoed with the boots of soldiers now carried the sound of chains and soft footsteps. The path to the courtyard was narrow, shadowed, and cruelly quiet. As she walked, she passed the cells of other prisoners. They peered through the bars, faces hollow, eyes wide. Some crossed themselves, others looked away. For a moment she seemed less like a condemned queen and more like a mirror held up to their own mortality. When she emerged into the courtyard, the grey light of morning washed over her. The smell of wet straw, smoke and iron filled the air. The guillotine stood far across the city, unseen yet felt, an invisible presence drawing her forward. They lifted her into the cart. The wood groaned under her weight, though she was light, reduced by months of captivity to little more than bone and will. The priest climbed in beside her, clutching the crucifix. 2 soldiers took their places on either side. The crowd had already begun to gather beyond the gates. The journey through Paris began in near silence. The horses moved slowly, hooves striking the stones in rhythm with the beating drums that would soon announce her death. On either side of the street, faces pressed against windows and doorways. Some jeered, others watched in grim fascination. Children laughed without understanding. Women spat. Men shouted her name, twisting it into curses. She sat upright, hands bound, her eyes fixed on some invisible point ahead. The wind tugged at her gown. Once, she had been surrounded by silk parasols and perfumed courtiers. Now mud splattered her hem as the cart rolled onward. Yet through it all she remained composed. Even her enemies would later admit it. The woman they had called Madame Deficit faced her end with the poise of a monarch. At one corner, the cart passed a bakery. The smell of fresh bread drifted into the air. A man laughed cruelly, shouting, "Let her eat cake!" The words cut through the noise like a blade. She did not react. Only her eyes lowered for a moment, not in shame, but in mourning. The lie had followed her to the very edge of death. The procession moved toward the Rue Saint-Honoré. The crowd thickened. Windows opened above, heads leaning out. Revolutionary guards kept order with their bayonets, but even they could not silence the rising tide of voices. Some called for vengeance, others murmured prayers. Paris, in all its contradictions, surrounded her, a city divided by ideals and blood. The priest whispered to her, urging courage. She nodded, her lips moving in silent prayer. The cross trembled in his hand, its shadow flickering across her face as the cart turned toward the Place de la Révolution. In the distance, she could now see the wooden frame rising above the square, the guillotine, glistening wet from the rain. It stood like an altar, the blade its sacred relic. As they neared the square, the drums began to sound, low, steady, merciless. Their rhythm filled the streets, drowning the murmurs of the crowd. Each beat erased another heartbeat. She closed her eyes for a moment, not in fear, but in remembrance of the gardens at Versailles, of her children's laughter, of a world that had collapsed beneath its own grandeur. The cart jolted suddenly as one wheel struck a stone. She swayed but caught herself, steady once more. The people closest to her watched in silence. Some saw defiance in her stillness. Others saw tragedy. Both were true. The square was near now. The air thickened with anticipation, charged like a storm about to break. Soldiers formed lines, forcing the crowd back. The guillotine loomed larger, its blade catching the pale light. She gazed upon it without expression. For months she had dreamed of this shape in the dark. And now it awaited her, patient, indifferent, eternal. The cart came to a stop. The drums fell silent. For a heartbeat, Paris seemed to hold its breath. The officer dismounted, approached the cart, and read aloud the decree. Words carried away by the wind before they reached her ears. It did not matter. She already knew them. Then, softly, she turned to the priest and whispered something no one else could hear. He nodded, tears slipping down his face. She looked once more toward the gray horizon where the sun was breaking through the clouds, faint and pale, like mercy trying to return to a world that no longer wanted it. The crowd stirred. A murmur rippled outward, impatience, hunger, disbelief that even death required ceremony. But within the cart, time slowed. Every breath became sacred, every movement deliberate. When the guards reached for her arm, she did not resist. The wooden platform awaited. The revolution demanded its sacrifice. And as she stepped down from the cart, one foot touching the earth of France for the last time, a strange silence fell over the square, the kind of silence that arrives before history holds its breath. Somewhere in the distance, the bells began to ring again. Not for celebration, not for mourning, simply because they always did. The sound drifted through the air as she mounted the scaffold, and in that fragile sound, one could almost hear the end of a century dying, and the beginning of something far colder taking its place. The square is already full when she arrives. The air hums with the restless energy of thousands, peasants, soldiers, vendors, and children, all drawn to the theater of death. The Place de la Révolution, once a stage for royal parades, now hosts a darker pageant. The guillotine stands at its center like a monument to reason turned ritual, its blade glinting under the weak light of morning. The wood is slick with rain, and darker streaks, older, deeper, mark where others have fallen. The cart halts beside the scaffold. The priest makes the sign of the cross, his hand trembling. The officer steps forward, calling her by the name she no longer owns. Marie Antoinette, Widow Capet. She descends from the cart slowly, her bound hands gripping the edge for balance. The crowd leans forward as one. Silence spreads like a chill. For all their hatred, they cannot look away. She looks smaller than they remember. The crown had once magnified her. Now, stripped of it, she is frail, colorless, a figure of bone and defiance. The white chemise clings to her in the damp air. A gust of wind lifts her hair, revealing the uneven line where the executioner's knife had shorn it. She blinks against the drizzle, her expression unreadable. She does not look to the crowd. Her gaze drifts upward, to the clouds moving across the Parisian sky, perhaps searching for something beyond the reach of men. The executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson, waits at the base of the scaffold. His face is expressionless, practiced. He has done this hundreds of times. Kings, generals, priests. He no longer believes in guilt or innocence, only in precision. He gestures for her to climb the steps. They are slick with rain, and she takes them carefully. The priest follows close behind, whispering words of comfort swallowed by the murmur of the crowd. Halfway up, her foot slips. She reaches out to steady herself, and her hand brushes against Sanson's boot. Her voice, calm and almost tender, breaks the silence. "Pardon me, monsieur. I did not mean to do it." The words hang in the air, a small human apology amid the machinery of execution. Sanson nods once, unable to speak. For a moment, even he seems haunted. When she reaches the top, the drums begin again. Slow, deliberate, unrelenting. Each beat erases the sound of breath. The scaffold trembles slightly beneath the weight of movement. The priest holds the crucifix before her. She kneels, pressing her lips to it. Her whisper is lost to history. Then she rises, shoulders squared, her gaze steady. The executioners approach, efficient as surgeons. They remove her cap. They guide her toward the wooden plank, the bascule, and help her lie down. Her neck rests in the hollow carved for it. The wood is cold, wet with rain and something older. The smell of iron fills the air. The priest murmurs her name, but she is no longer listening. The blade gleams above her, suspended in its frame. A single rope holds it in place, its fibers swollen from the damp. Sanson checks the mechanism, his movements methodical. He does not look at her. He cannot. The drums quicken. The crowd begins to murmur prayers and curses alike. A soldier raises his hand, the signal. The drums stop. The silence that follows is unbearable. It stretches, heavy as stone. Every eye in the square fixes on that single point where steel meets air. The executioner releases the rope. The blade falls. It is faster than thought. A sound between thunder and breath. The moment is so brief that even the wind seems to pause. Then the roar erupts. Thousands of voices crash together, cheering, weeping, screaming. Hats are thrown into the air. Men embrace. Women laugh. Some faint. Sanson lifts the severed head, holding it high for all to see. The face, pale and still, retains the faintest echo of composure. Her eyes are half open, as though refusing to give her audience the satisfaction of full surrender. Blood drips down his arm, falling to the planks below, where it joins the dark stains of those who came before. A cry surges from the crowd. "Vive la République!" It rolls across the square like thunder. The soldiers pound their muskets against the ground in rhythm. The sound is deafening, jubilant, unholy. The Revolution has claimed its queen. And yet, beneath the noise, another sound lingers. The low hum of the blade settling back into place. The guillotine, indifferent to triumph or grief, stands ready for its next offering. The priest falls to his knees, his crucifix slick with rain and blood. He mutters a prayer no one can hear. Nearby, Sanson wipes his hands on a rag, his expression blank. He has done his duty, but his eyes betray fatigue, not of the body, but of the soul. The cheering continues, but he no longer listens. He turns away, signaling to his assistants to remove the remains. The white chemise, now crimson at the collar, flutters in the wind like a torn flag. The body is placed in a rough wooden coffin, unmarked. No inscription, no ceremony. The head follows, wrapped hastily in cloth. The cart that once carried her to the scaffold will now carry her remains to the Madeleine Cemetery, a place without names, without prayers. The crowd disperses slowly. The square, moments ago alive with noise, begins to empty. Vendors pack away their goods. Children chase one another through the puddles. The blood seeps between the stones, carried off by the rain. The executioners dismantle their tools, cleaning the blade with practiced care. In a few hours, another will stand where she fell. The Revolution has no time for ghosts, yet the city feels changed. The air itself seems to recoil, heavy with something unseen. Even those who cheered feel a strange quiet as they walk away, the uneasy calm that follows excess. The act had been righteous, they told themselves. Justice had been served. But justice, when soaked in blood, leaves a stain that reason cannot wash away. High above the square, the clouds shift. Sunlight breaks through for a moment, touching the wooden frame of the guillotine. The blade catches the light, gleaming like a mirror. For an instant, it reflects the faces of those below. Men and women who had once lived in fear of monarchs, now standing as monarchs of death. The drums resume briefly, a hollow echo marking the end of ceremony. The sound rolls across the rooftops, fading into the distance. Then comes only wind, carrying with it the scent of iron, of rain, of history. The Revolution has silenced a queen, But in that silence, something stirs. The realization that the guillotine does not stop with crowns. Its hunger is impartial. Its logic absolute. The people return to their homes, stepping through puddles stained pink. The soldiers march away. The priest gathers what fragments of sanctity remain and disappears into the crowd. The square is left empty except for the scaffold, the ropes swaying gently in the wind, and in that stillness, the blade drips one last time, crimson into the earth. Paris absorbs it without protest. The crowd's cheers fade, but the echo remains, not in the air, but in the conscience of a nation that mistook vengeance for virtue. The sky begins to clear. The light grows softer. Yet beneath that calm, the shadow of the guillotine stretches across the stones, reaching beyond the square, beyond the city, into the very soul of France itself. For though the queen is gone, her death has left a wound deeper than any blade could carve. And in the silence that follows, history waits, knowing that the blood it drinks today will not be its last. The dawn was gray, a pallid light crawling over the roofs of Paris, as though even the sun hesitated to touch what was about to unfold. In the narrow courtyard of the conciergerie, frost clung to the cobblestones. The air was heavy with the metallic scent of water and blood, remnants of other mornings like this one. Inside, behind the iron bars, Marie Antoinette sat upright, not as a queen, but as a ghost who had finally accepted her haunting. Her hair, once powdered and adorned with pearls, had been crudely cut. For the blade, they said. Each lock that fell seemed to take with it a fragment of her former self. The sound of scissors biting through her hair was mechanical, unfeeling, yet strangely intimate. The guard who held them could not meet her eyes. She was dressed in white, not by choice, but by irony. White, the color of innocence, now the uniform of the condemned. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded her handkerchief, but she did not weep. Her silence had become her final weapon, a defiance sharper than words, stronger than crowns. Outside, the city was already awake. The crowd had gathered before the cart had even arrived. Men stood on barrels. Women pressed forward with baskets still filled from the morning's market. Children climbed lampposts to see the fallen queen. There was no music, only murmurs. The same city that had once cheered her wedding bells now waited to cheer her death. When the guards came for her, she stood. The chair scraped softly against the floor, the sound of finality. She walked with slow precision, each step deliberate, as though she were still in the hall of mirrors, each movement an echo of grace refusing to die. As she entered the cart, the wheels creaked against the frozen ground. The horse snorted, steam rising like ghosts. 2 soldiers sat beside her, muskets across their knees. They did not speak. The route was familiar, the same path that had carried so many before her. Yet for the crowd, this was no ordinary execution. This was justice, or vengeance, or perhaps just hunger wearing both masks. Along the way, they jeered. Some shouted insults. Others prayed aloud, hoping heaven was listening. One woman, clutching a loaf of bread, spat at the cart and cried, "For our children!" Marie did not respond. Her eyes moved slowly across the faces, not in anger, but in recognition. They were the same faces that once bowed before her, now twisted by desperation. In them, she saw the kingdom she had never truly known. At one corner, the cart jolted violently. She lost her footing and instinctively reached out. Her hand brushed against the knee of one of the guards. "Pardon, monsieur," she whispered softly. Those would be her final words. Not a plea, not a prayer, just courtesy. Even in ruin, her instinct was civility. When the cart reached the Place de la Révolution, the guillotine stood waiting, a tall wooden frame darkened by years of use, glistening faintly with morning dew. Around it, the smell of sawdust mixed with sweat and fear. The blade hung still, a silent witness to human invention and cruelty. Above, the sky had turned colorless, a blank canvas for history to write upon. The executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson, adjusted the straps. He had done this hundreds of times, yet never before to a queen. His hands were steady, but his eyes betrayed fatigue, the weariness of a man who had become the instrument of a nation's wrath. As she climbed the scaffold, the boards creaked beneath her. She moved slowly, not out of fear, but dignity. Each step seemed to echo across time. When she reached the top, she turned, not toward the crowd, but toward the sky. Perhaps she searched for God. Perhaps she searched for meaning. The crowd grew silent. Even the birds seemed to pause. A drum rolled once. Then again, she placed her neck upon the wood. Her eyes closed, a flash of silver, a sound like thunder. The blade fell, a gasp rippled through the masses, brief, collective, almost reverent. Then applause. Her head was lifted, shown to the crowd as proof that the old world had finally died. The people roared, but the sound was hollow, a noise born from centuries of hunger and humiliation. For a moment it seemed they were celebrating their own liberation. But as the echo faded, what remained was silence, the kind that chills the bones. The executioner held her head for a few seconds longer, then lowered it into the basket. Blood seeped through the straw, red against white cloth. The queen was gone, yet the revolution did not end. Nor did the hunger. The crowds would gather again, day after day, to watch others fall beneath the same blade. The guillotine had become their altar, and every execution, a sermon. In the years that followed, Paris would change its name for that square, erasing Révolution as though the word itself carried too much blood. Statues would rise where heads once fell. Pigeons would rest where tears had dried. But beneath the stones, the memory remained. Marie Antoinette became more than a queen, more than a victim. She became a mirror. To some she was arrogance punished. To others, innocence destroyed. History, as always, wrote her twice, once in ink, once in blood. And somewhere between those two versions, the truth still bleeds quietly, because her death was not the end of tyranny. It was its reflection, dressed as justice, crowned with applause. And in the silence that followed the final cheer, France realized what it had done. It had killed not a queen, but its own humanity. The blade was cleaned. The crowd dispersed. The day continued, but somewhere beneath those cobblestones, her scream still trembles.